On June 4, 1944, just 2 days before D-Day, military photographer Robert Capa took what he thought was a routine snapshot of American Rangers preparing for the landing in Normandy, at a coastal bunker near Portsmouth, England. The photograph captures 20 soldiers from the 2nd Ranger Battalion during their final briefing before Operation Overlord. Their faces reflect the typical pre-battle mix of determination and fear. The image remained in military archives for decades until, in 2024, historians digitizing World War II photographs for the 80th anniversary of D-Day used advanced facial recognition technology to identify the soldiers. What they discovered shocked the community of military historians. Among the 20 Rangers was Staff Sergeant Heinrich Müller, a German-American whose loyalty had never been questioned. However, digital enhancement revealed that Müller bore a striking resemblance to Klaus Weber, a Nazi spy who was reportedly killed in a resistance operation in France 3 months earlier. Further investigation revealed that Weber had assumed Müller's identity after the real sergeant died in a training accident, successfully infiltrating the ranks of the Rangers to gather intelligence about the landing plans for D-Day. The photograph captured the moment when a Nazi operative was receiving final instructions on the most important military operation in the history of the Allies, which explains why German troops seemed unusually prepared for certain aspects of the Normandy landings, despite the supposed secrecy of the operation. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss new videos. The photograph fell into the hands of Dr. Alexei Savelyev, a Russian-American military historian working at the National Archives in the United States, completely by chance. The project to digitize archival materials for D-Day began in 2023, when the archive's management decided to create a complete digital database of all available materials on the preparation and execution of the operation. Overlord Savelyev, specializing in intelligence operations of the Second World War, was tasked with cataloging several boxes of photographs that had remained virtually untouched for decades. These materials arrived at the archive in the 1970s from the personal collection of Robert Capa after his death, and many of them had never been published before. The photograph in question seemed unremarkable at first glance. A black and white image measuring approximately 8 by 10 inches, slightly faded around the edges, with Capa's barely discernible signature in the lower right corner. On the back was a simple inscription in pencil: Portsmouth, 2nd Ranger Battalion, June 4, 1944. Savelyev scanned the photograph along with hundreds of others, assigned it a digital identifier, and added it to the database. It was then that this incredible story began. The cataloging system developed for the project included an experimental facial recognition module capable of identifying servicemen using personal records available in the archive. This technology, created in collaboration with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, was intended to help historians identify soldiers in group photographs, which often presented a real puzzle for researchers. When the program processed Capa's photograph, it identified 15 out of 20 soldiers, which in itself was an outstanding result. The soldiers' names were automatically added to the photograph's metadata, and the system notified Savelyev that the process was complete. While reviewing the results, the historian noticed one name that seemed strangely familiar: Staff Sergeant Heinrich Müller. Savelyev couldn't recall where he had heard that name before, but something told him it was connected to one of his previous studies. Intrigued, he decided to check Müller's personal file in the archive, and what he discovered made his heart race. Heinrich Müller was born in 1918 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to a family of German immigrants. His father, Otto Müller, moved to the United States in 1910 and worked as a mechanic at an automobile factory. The young Heinrich graduated from school in 1936 and enlisted in the United States Army in 1940, shortly before America's entry into the war. According to his personal file, he proved himself to be an exemplary soldier, quickly rising through the ranks thanks to his discipline and leadership qualities. In 1943, he was selected for special training as a Ranger and eventually joined the 2nd Ranger Battalion, an elite unit that was to play a key role in the Normandy landings. But something about this biography troubled Savelyev. He couldn't quite put his finger on what it was, but he felt he was missing something important. Continuing to review Müller's file, he came across a record of an accident during training in Scotland in February 1944. Müller suffered a serious head injury when he fell from a cliff during night exercises, but after 2 weeks in the hospital, he returned to duty. This seemed unusual for the time, when medical care on the front lines was far from ideal, and soldiers with serious injuries were often sent home. But what they would discover next would change everything. Savliev decided to examine the photograph more closely, using image enhancement software. He zoomed in on Muller's face, who was standing in the second row to the right of the center. At first glance, it was the face of an ordinary American soldier, a little tense before the upcoming operation. However, something in the expression in his eyes caught the historian's attention. While the other soldiers were looking at the officer giving the briefing, Muller's gaze was directed slightly to the side, as if he were watching something or someone outside the frame. Savliev continued to enhance the image, adjusting the contrast and sharpness, until he obtained the clearest possible image of the sergeant's face. And that's when he noticed the scar, a thin line running from his right ear to his chin. This scar was not mentioned in Muller's personal file, which in itself was not unusual, but for some reason, it made the historian think. He decided to search the archive database, using this physical description in combination with the approximate age and ethnicity. The search yielded several matches, but one of them made Savliev shudder. Klaus Weber, a German agent trained by the Abwehr and sent to France in 1943, had a very similar description, including a characteristic scar on the right side of his face. According to French resistance documents, Weber was killed in a shootout with partisans in January 1944 near Cannes. His body was allegedly identified by French underground fighters and secretly buried. But was that the truth? Modern technology was about to reveal a terrible secret. Savliev decided to apply advanced biometric facial analysis technology, developed to identify unknown individuals in historical photographs. This technology, significantly more complex than simple facial recognition, analyzed characteristics such as the distance between the eyes, the shape of the skull, the contour of the ears, and dozens of other microfeatures that remain unchanged even when appearance changes. For comparison, he needed a photograph of Klaus Weber, and, after several days of searching through the archives of German intelligence captured by the Allies at the end of the war, he found Weber's personal file, including his photograph taken upon entering the Abwehr. After uploading both images to the analysis system, Savliev nervously awaited the results. After a few minutes, a message appeared on the screen that shocked him to the core. Match. 98%. From a scientific point of view, it was the same person. But how was that possible? How could a Nazi spy end up among the elite American Rangers on the eve of the most important operation of the war? And, more importantly, how did he manage to avoid exposure for several months among experienced soldiers? Savliev understood that he was on the verge of a discovery capable of rewriting the history of Operation Overlord, and he needed more evidence. He decided to delve into the history of the real Heinrich Müller and the moment when his identity might have been stolen. According to official records, Müller was injured during training in Scotland on February 14, 1944. He was taken to a field hospital with a serious head injury and remained there until February 28, after which he returned to his unit. Savliev requested medical records from the hospital but discovered a strange discrepancy. The records indicated that on the night of February 16th to 17th, there was a small fire in the medical wing where Müller was located. Although no one was seriously injured, some medical charts were damaged, including Müller's. A new chart was created on February 18th, but by a different doctor who had not initially examined the sergeant. This could be a coincidence, but Savliev's intuition told him that there was more to it. He decided to check if there were any reports of unusual incidents in that area of Scotland in mid-February 1944. After several days of searching in British military archives, he found a brief mention of the detention of a suspicious civilian 5 kilometers from the military hospital on February 15th. The suspect was questioned by local police, but then released due to lack of evidence. The name of the detainee was not indicated, but the description referred to a middle-aged man with a German accent who claimed to be a Swiss businessman. The mystery that had been kept for more than 80 years was beginning to unravel. Savliev put forward a hypothesis which, although it seemed fantastic, explained all these strange coincidences. Klaus Weber did not die in France in January 1944. Somehow, he managed to fake his death and cross the English Channel, possibly with the help of German agents already operating in Britain. Learning about the American Rangers' training in Scotland, he devised a daring plan. He tracked down a soldier of German origin who resembled him and waited for the opportune moment. When Heinrich Müller was injured and isolated in the hospital, Weber found a way to get in and possibly killed the real Müller, then took his place, using the fire as a diversion to explain any inconsistencies in the medical records. However, there was still not enough evidence. Savliev's hypothesis was based on circumstantial evidence and coincidences. He needed something more substantial that could confirm his theory. The secret that had been kept for decades was about to be revealed. Savliev decided to trace the path of the 2nd Ranger Battalion after Sergeant Muller's return from the hospital. According to military records, the battalion continued to train in Scotland until the end of March, then was transferred to the south of England for final preparations for the landing. It was there, on June 4th, that Kappa's famous photograph was taken. But what happened in those critical days before D-Day? Did anyone in command know about the spy in their ranks? To answer these questions, Savliev turned to the diaries and memoirs of surviving participants in the operation. In the memoirs of Captain James Dolan, the company commander in which Müller served, he found an interesting mention. Dolan wrote that on the evening of June 5th, a few hours before departure, he noticed Müller leaving the camp for a short time. This seemed strange to him, given the strict ban on leaving the territory in the last hours before the operation. But Müller explained that he had gone to check his equipment, which he had left in one of the storage rooms. Dolan believed him, given the sergeant's impeccable reputation, but still made a mental note of the incident. What if, at that moment, Müller, or rather Weber, was passing information to German intelligence? This would explain why the German command, although it did not know the exact location and time of the landing, was still able to take some effective countermeasures, especially on the Omaha Beach sector, where the Americans suffered the heaviest losses. However, a contradiction bothered Savliev. If Weber was indeed a spy embedded in the ranks of the Rangers, why did he go with them on the landing, risking his life? It would have been more logical to find a way to stay in England or desert at the last moment. The answer to this question came from an unexpected source, but what they discovered next was even more disturbing. In the archives of German military intelligence captured by the Allies at the end of the war, Savliev discovered an encrypted message sent on June 6, 1964, from the Caen area, about 200 kilometers from Normandy. The message was signed with the code name Hagen, Weber's known operational pseudonym. It stated, "Operation has begun. Landing on 5 beaches from Utah to Sword. Main forces concentrated on Omaha. Executing second part of mission. Heil Hitler." This message confirmed not only that Weber was alive and acting as a spy, but also that he had some second mission besides gathering intelligence about the landing. What could it be? The answer came from an analysis of the events at Point du Hoc, a rocky promontory between Utah and Omaha beaches, where the 2nd Ranger Battalion was tasked with destroying German artillery positions threatening both landing beaches. It was one of the most difficult and important operations of D-Day. According to official history, the Rangers successfully stormed the cliffs and captured the positions, but found that most of the guns had been moved by the Germans shortly before the landing. They found them in the forest about a kilometer from the coast and destroyed them, thereby completing their mission. However, over the next 2 days, they withstood several fierce counterattacks by the Germans and suffered heavy losses. Of the 225 Rangers who started the operation, only about 90 remained in service by the end of the 2nd day. Savliev drew attention to the list of casualties and discovered that Sergeant Heinrich Müller was listed as missing in action since the evening of June 6. According to the testimony of survivors, he was last seen while repelling a German counterattack and was presumed dead in action. However, his body was never found. What if Weber did not die, but used the chaos of battle to cross over to the German side, passing on valuable information about the positions and condition of the American troops? This would explain the intensity and accuracy of the German counterattacks in that sector, as well as the unusually high losses among the Rangers. To test this theory, Savliev decided to study the German military archives of that period. After several weeks of searching, he discovered a report from the commander of the 116th Infantry Division of the Wehrmacht, defending that sector, dated June 7, 1944. It mentioned a German agent who had returned from behind enemy lines with valuable information about the location and strength of American troops. The agent's name was not indicated, but the description matched Weber. The evidence was becoming increasingly convincing, but Saveliev needed a final confirmation that would leave no room for doubt, and he decided to turn to modern DNA analysis technology. Modern forensic technologies were about to reveal the truth hidden for more than 80 years. In the personal file of the real Heinrich Müller, Saveliev discovered that he had living relatives on his sister's side living in Wisconsin. After several phone calls and explanations, he obtained consent for DNA analysis from Müller's nephew, Thomas Schmidt. At the same time, working with German archives, he established that Klaus Weber also had relatives living in Bavaria. With the help of German colleagues, he managed to contact Weber's great-nephew, Karl Mayr, who agreed to provide a DNA sample for the study. Now Saveliev needed a DNA sample from the alleged Müller from the photograph. But how to obtain the genetic material of a person who died or disappeared 80 years ago? The answer came from an unexpected source. In 1947, 3 years after D-Day, a mass grave of German soldiers who died during the battles for the bridgehead was discovered in Normandy. Among them was an unidentified officer with documents in the name of Hans Wagner, a lieutenant in the Wehrmacht. However, some details did not match the official records, and the identity of this officer remained in question. The body was exhumed in the 1990s for DNA analysis as part of a program to identify unknown soldiers, but the results were inconclusive due to the limitations of the technologies of the time. The remains were stored in a special storage facility of the German Military Commission for the Care of Military Graves. Saveliev put forward a bold hypothesis that, if this unidentified officer was none other than Klaus Weber, who died later during the fighting in Normandy. If so, modern DNA analysis technologies could establish his identity with much greater accuracy than was possible 30 years ago. After lengthy negotiations and the completion of the necessary permits, DNA samples were obtained from the remains of the unknown officer, as well as from the living relatives of Müller and Weber. The analysis was carried out in one of the most advanced forensic laboratories in Switzerland, specializing in working with degraded DNA. The results obtained a month later were unambiguous. The DNA of the unknown officer showed a 99% match with the sample from Weber's relative and had no relationship with the Müller family. Moreover, an analysis of mitochondrial DNA, transmitted along the maternal line, confirmed that the unknown officer came from the same maternal line as the Weber family. The whole truth was finally revealed. Klaus Weber, a Nazi spy, did indeed fake his death in France, penetrated Britain, killed the real Heinrich Müller, and took his place among the Rangers. He passed information about the landing plans to the German command, and then, during the chaos of the fighting on D-Day, crossed over to the German side, providing valuable information about the positions of the Americans. Subsequently, he was probably enlisted in regular Wehrmacht units under a false name and died during the fighting in Normandy. But the consequences of this discovery went far beyond a simple historical fact. It forced a rethinking of some aspects of Operation Overlord and raised new questions about the extent of German infiltration into the Allied forces. However, there was also something else, another detail that bothered Saveliev. If Weber was such a highly qualified agent, how did he manage to go unnoticed for several months among experienced soldiers, many of whom knew the real Müller well? Even with physical similarities, differences in behavior, habits, and knowledge of personal details should have given him away. This contradiction haunted the researcher until he discovered Weber's personal file in the Abwehr archives with complete information about his training. It turned out that Weber was not an ordinary agent but part of a special program known as Operation Deadhead, launched in 1942. This program trained agents for long-term integration, with a special emphasis on full immersion in the target's personality. Agents underwent intensive training, studying all aspects of the life of the person they were to replace, from family history to the smallest habits. They also underwent surgical procedures to enhance physical similarity, if necessary. Weber was one of the most successful graduates of this program. According to his dossier, he spent several months studying the lives of American soldiers of German origin, their slang, habits, and cultural characteristics. His goal was not specifically Heinrich Müller, but any suitable candidate who could be replaced. Muller simply happened to be in the right place at the right time, meeting all the criteria that Weber was looking for. The truth was even darker than initially assumed. Savliev decided to contact the surviving veterans of the 2nd Ranger Battalion to find out if they had noticed any changes in Muller's behavior after his return from the hospital. Most of them had already passed away, but he managed to find 97-year-old Richard Thompson, who served with Muller and now lived in a nursing home in California. Despite his advanced age, Thompson retained a clear memory of those days. When Savliev showed him the photograph and told him about his research, the old ranger was silent for a long time, looking at the image of his long-dead comrades. Then he slowly nodded and said, "I always felt that something was wrong with Henry after that incident in Scotland. He became more withdrawn, joked less. We attributed it to a head injury. Back then, post-traumatic stress wasn't talked about like it is now. There were other little things. For example, he stopped receiving letters from home, although his mother used to write to him every week. When I asked him about it, he said that he had asked her not to write before the operation so as not to be distracted. I believed him then, but now, when you've told me all this, a lot makes sense." This testimony became the last piece of the puzzle. The story of Klaus Weber, a Nazi spy who infiltrated the ranks of the American Rangers, was now fully documented and confirmed by various sources. Savliev's discovery caused a bombshell in the historical community. Articles about the Nazi spy among the Rangers appeared in leading academic journals and popular publications. Several television documentary investigations were conducted, and the National Archives of the United States organized a special exhibition dedicated to this story, with the original Kappa photograph as the central exhibit. But the most significant consequence was the revision of some aspects of Operation Overlord. Military historians began to analyze how much the information transmitted by Weber influenced the actions of the German command and whether it could have been the cause of the high casualties on Omaha Beach. Some experts suggested that, if not for Weber's betrayal, the landing could have taken place with fewer casualties, especially in the Point du Hoc sector. This story also led to a broader discussion of the topic of espionage during the Second World War and the vulnerabilities in the security system of the Allied forces. Other cases of infiltration were discovered, although none of them were as dramatic and significant as the case of Weber. For the family of the real Heinrich Müller, this discovery became an opportunity to finally learn the truth about the fate of their relative. After so many years, they received certainty and were able to properly honor his memory. Müller's name was added to the memorial plaque for fallen American soldiers in Normandy, indicating the true circumstances of his death. In 2025, on the 81st anniversary of D-Day, a special memorial dedicated to Heinrich Müller and other soldiers who died in that operation was erected at the site of the Rangers' landing in Point du Hoc. The opening ceremony was attended by Müller's relatives, as well as Alexei Savliev, whose research made it possible to reveal this amazing story. But perhaps the most important legacy of this discovery was a reminder of how individual destinies are woven into the fabric of great history. The story of Heinrich Müller and Klaus Weber showed that behind every great historical event there are thousands of personal dramas, many of which remain unknown for decades. For Alexei Savliev, this research became the culmination of his academic career. His work was recognized with several prestigious awards in the field of military history, and the methodology he used, combining traditional archival research with modern technologies, became a model for new generations of historians. But the most significant recognition for him was a letter he received from the granddaughter of the real Heinrich Müller. She wrote, "You have returned our grandfather to us. All these years we thought he had died a hero on the battlefield, but now we know that he was the victim of a cruel betrayal. However, this does not diminish his sacrifice. He still gave his life for his country, just the circumstances were different. Thank you for the truth, however bitter it may be." These words reminded Savliev that history is not just dates and facts, but living people with their hopes, fears, and destinies. And sometimes one photograph, one moment captured on film, can tell a story that might otherwise have remained unknown forever. The case of Kappa's photograph also raised important questions about historical memory and how many more secrets of the Second World War remain unrevealed. Every year, with the development of new technologies and research methods, historians have the opportunity to take a fresh look at long-known facts and discover in them what previously went unnoticed. In a world where information is becoming more accessible and analysis technologies are becoming more advanced, we may have to revise many established ideas about the past. The story of Klaus Weber and Heinrich Müller is a vivid example of how, even 80 years after the events, the truth can surface, changing our understanding of one of the most significant moments in the history of the 20th century. But this story also reminds us of the human side of war, of soldiers such as the real Heinrich Müller, whose lives were cut short not on the battlefield, but as a result of a hidden, secret war of intelligence, of families who for decades lived with an incomplete or distorted version of the truth, and of those who, like Klaus Weber, made the choice to serve an ideology that ultimately led to the death of millions, including himself. At the end of his research, Savliev discovered another interesting detail. In Klaus Weber's personal file, there was a record that before being sent on the mission, he received the Iron Cross Second Class personally from a high-ranking SS officer. This was an unusual honor for an intelligence officer, whose work, by definition, was supposed to remain in the shadows. Savliev suggested that Weber's mission was of particular importance to the Nazi leadership. Perhaps it was part of a broader plan to disrupt the Allied landings. This detail led him to another discovery. In the SS archives captured by the Allies, he found a mention of a secret Operation Observer, the purpose of which was to infiltrate several agents into key units of the Allied forces before D-Day. Weber was only one of these agents. Were there others? And if so, did any of them manage to survive and go unnoticed? These questions opened up a new direction for research, but one thing was clear. The history of the Second World War, even 80 years later, continues to reveal its secrets, reminding us of the complexity and multifaceted nature of the conflict that changed the world forever. The photograph taken by Robert Capa on June 4, 1944, is now stored in a special department of the National Archives of the United States dedicated to Operation Overlord. Next to it is detailed information about each of the soldiers captured on it, including the true story of the man who posed as Heinrich Müller. It is a reminder that, sometimes, a single image can conceal an entire story of betrayal, heroism, and human tragedy. For visitors to the archive, this photograph has become a symbol of not only the preparation for the decisive battle of World War II, but also a reminder of the invisible war of intelligence that was waged in the shadows of major battles. A war in which identities changed, the lines between truth and falsehood blurred, and the destinies of individuals became mere bargaining chips in a global conflict. And for historians like Alexei Savliev, it has become an example of how modern technology, combined with traditional historical methodology, can shed light on long-forgotten secrets of the past, changing our understanding of events that seem to have been studied and understood long ago. In a world where information is becoming ever more accessible and analysis technologies are becoming increasingly sophisticated, we may have to re-examine many established perceptions of the past. The story of Klaus Weber and Heinrich Müller is a prime example of how, even 80 years after the events, the truth can come to the surface, changing our understanding of one of the most significant moments in 20th century history. The evidence was impossible to ignore. Ultimately, the story of Capa's photograph and the Nazi spy among the Rangers became not just a sensational historical discovery, but also an important reminder of the complexities of wartime, the moral dilemmas faced by people in extreme circumstances, and how individual actions can influence the course of history. Today, when we look at this photograph, we see not only a group of soldiers preparing for battle, but also an intricate tapestry of fates woven together in a single historical moment. We see true heroes, such as the other Rangers, many of whom gave their lives on the cliffs of Point du Hoc. We see a victim of a treacherous plot, Heinrich Müller, whose identity was stolen and whose life was cut short far from the battlefield. And we see the dark figure of Klaus Weber, a man who was willing to betray his trusted comrades for the sake of an ideology that ultimately led the world to catastrophe. This photograph reminds us that history is not just a sequence of events, but a complex interweaving of human destinies, decisions, and their consequences. And sometimes, to truly understand the past, we need to look not only at what is clearly visible on the surface, but also to seek out the hidden stories that lie in the shadows of great events. For Alexei Savliev, the discovery of the Weber and Müller story was not the end, but the beginning of a new chapter in his research career. He has now dedicated himself to studying other possible cases of Nazi agents infiltrating the ranks of the Allies, seeking to shed light on as yet unknown aspects of the war of intelligence that was waged in parallel with the main battles of World War II. And for those of us living in the 21st century, this story serves as a reminder that the past never completely goes away. It continues to live in archival documents, photographs, memories, and family histories, waiting for the moment when someone, armed with knowledge, technology, and, most importantly, a striving for truth, can uncover secrets that seemed lost forever. This is the true value of historical research, not only in establishing facts, but also in understanding the human dimension of history, in recognizing that behind every event, every date, and every name, there are real people with their hopes, fears, decisions, and destinies. And sometimes, one photograph can tell their story better than 1,000 words.